In this video, we're going to talk about graphing linear equations. So before you attempt this lesson, something you should be comfortable with is the slope of a line and just how to graph a general equation. All right, graphing any equation, you can plug in x's and get y's, but then you can learn some shortcuts depending on specific types of equations. So in this case, we're learning shortcuts to graph linear equations. All right, so this is what I just referenced, is that we already have a strategy for graphing any equation. All right, linear equation is just a specific type. All right, so if I want to graph any equation, I just pick an x value, pick any x value, and plug it into the equation. All right, then I solve to get my y value that goes with it. And since I picked x and got a y, that gives me a point that's going to go on my graph. And I just repeat that as many times as necessary. All right, that as many times as necessary thing is really nice with lines, because how many are necessary to graph a line? You just need 2 points to graph a line. So as long as I have 2 points to graph a line, then I just draw a line that connects those, and that's the graph of the line. And there's an even quicker shortcut for graphing lines. That's using the special form for a line known as slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So remember from our slope video, a lot of times slope gets called m. So this is the slope of my line, which tells me how steep it is. And this b here turns out to be the y-intercept, right? Which a y-intercept is where my graph hits the y-axis. So this is going to quickly give me my 2 points without having to do a lot of extra work of plugging in values and things like that. So I want to graph this equation. I could start plugging in 0, I could plug in 1, plug in 2, plug in -4, all this stuff. I could plug in all these values and graph it, and that's perfectly fine. It's just going to take you longer than using these shortcuts. All right, so I recognize this in y equals mx plus b form. This -2/3 is my slope, and this 3 is my y-intercept. So right away, I instantly get 1 point on my graph. I instantly know that 3 is when my graph hits the y-axis. That's what intercept means. It intersects it. It hits the axis. All right, so right away, I already have 1 point. And we saw we only need 2 points to graph a line. So I just need to figure out how to get one more. Well, if you remember from slope, slope is rise over run. So if I look at -2/3, that's the slope of this line. So I'm going to rise -2. What does it mean to rise in negative number? It just means to go down. So I'm going to go down 2 and then run 3. So I'm going to go right 3. And that'll give me my next point on my graph. Because I rose -2 and ran 3. That's the slope of the line that I'm talking about. And now I just connect them to make a line. So I connect them. I always remember lines go off forever. So I just continue the line this way and continue the line that way. And that is the graph of this line. All right, so here's one for you to try on your own. And recognize that's in y equals mx plus b form. All right, and go ahead and graph this line. And I'll show you the answer in 3, 2, 1. And here is the graph of this line. My y-intercept is -2. So you can see that here in blue. And my slope is just 3. But remember, we can always make a whole number a fraction by dividing by 1. So 3 over 1 is my rise over run. So I rise 3, run 1. And that gives me that red dot. And then I connect them to get my final answer. One thing to be really careful with when you're trying to graph lines is people know y equals mx plus b. You've probably learned it a bunch of times. But if your equation is not in y equals mx plus b, most notably the kind of y is completely by itself, then the coefficients don't tell you anything. So if I have like 8x plus 2y equals 4, that y is not by itself. So my slope's not 8, my y-intercept's not 4. I have to do I have to do a little bit more work before I get it into where the coefficients are actually telling me something. I just know that if it's not in exactly this form up here, the numbers mean absolutely nothing. Not absolutely nothing, but not what you think. All right, so 2x plus 4y equals 8. All right, the y equals mx plus b. It definitely does not look like that. So now you have a bunch of options. You can just graph this line like you graph any equation by just plugging in some x values. We know it's a line, so I only need to do that twice. But I like to use y equals mx plus b using slope and stuff. So the way you get there is y equals mx plus b. The y is by itself. So we're going to solve this equation for y. So I want to get this y by itself. So first thing I'm going to do is get the terms that aren't y. In this case, this 2x. I want to get that to the other side. It's going to be 4y equals negative 2x plus 8. All right, I can't combine the negative 2x and the 8 because they're not like terms, so I have to leave it like that. And again, I want the y completely by itself, so I'm going to divide by 4. And as long as I divide everything by 4, the equation's still the same. So that now gives me y all by itself. Negative 2x divided by 4. The 2 and the 4 are both divisible by 2, so I can simplify that to negative 1/2 x. And 8 divided by 4 is 2. All right, so just working on simplifying. If you're comfortable with solving equations and dividing, then you can do this step. And now I know my y-intercept is 2. My slope is negative 1/2, so I'm going to rise negative 1, run 2 to get my other point. And then I connect them. All right, so that's how you can use y equals mx plus b, even if your equation didn't start in that form. Again, the other option is just to do our general method. Plug in x equals 0, you get 2. Plug in x equals 1. In this case, you'd get what, like 1.5. All right, that's also perfectly acceptable. Just plotting points and connecting them with a line. All right, but here's one for you to try on your own. I go ahead and graph this linear equation using whichever method you prefer. I'll show you the solution in 3, 2, 1. And here's the solution I got. So again, I changed it into y equals mx plus b forms. The first thing I had to do is subtract x from both sides. Then I had to get rid of that negative 3, so divide everything by negative 3, and it gives me this equation in y equals mx plus b. So my y-intercept is negative 3. That's my red dot. And I have to rise 1, run 3 to get that blue dot. And then I connect them. Again, perfectly acceptable. Also just plug in 0, plug in 1, plug in whatever, and get your points and connect them with a line. All right, so go ahead and practice graphing linear equations. So in this practice, they're all linear equations. You can kind of graph them whichever method you prefer, but we just focused on that kind of shortcut of using the intercept and the slope. All right, so that's kind of the way I'd prefer it. But again, if you have a method of graphing lines that you prefer, also do that.